Hi guys, Trick Tiger here, and today I'm going to be showing you how to make this little objective pulse device. I'm going to include some stuff as a download so that you can just grab the files if necessary, but I'll hopefully talk you through how to make your own version. As you can see, this pulse starts off as a green arrow and then it turns blue as it moves along the path and disappears at the end. And it's also leaving this little trail behind, which makes it nice and easy for a player to follow. Um, so the Niagara system itself has these two user parameters. It has an active, which is just a bool, true or false. So if it's true, it starts spawning the arrows. If it's false, it doesn't do anything. And then the target allows me to set where I want this to point to. So just to show off the functionality, if I put that up in the air, the arrows go up in the air. So, okay, so so let's start with the Niagara system. So the first thing I would do is here's my system, and I would make sure that it's on critical. So I've got this on looping critical because this is a looping one. I found that if you have it on anything other than one of the critical ones, that it doesn't always show to people on all settings, but the critical ones do seem to show up for everyone, so that's quite handy. I have loop behavior on infinite and a loop duration of 5 seconds. It doesn't really matter because it's infinite. Okay, so what I was saying before about the user parameters, now these are great because these ones can be accessed using verse, which is what we're going to do later. Um, if we wanted to add a new one, so if I want to add a bool, so you just do bool, click it, and it makes me a fresh bool that I can then, because it's got the V, means I can access it in verse. And this one, the target that I want it to go to is just a vector3, so just a vector target. Okay, and this is what allows me to control this with verse and tell it where to point to. So what did we do first? So I will just tick the active box so that you can see it in the preview. It doesn't really help much because it's just going backwards and forwards because it's going to 0. So starting with the arrow, let me turn off the trail for now. So if I start with just the arrow, so what do we do with just the arrow? So we start with our renderer. So we're going to We're going to render the mesh, and I've got the arrow that I modeled before. Um, and the only real important setting in here is this facing mode. So I've got it on velocity, not on default, because on default it does this. Look, but if you set this to velocity, then it's always aligned in the direction that it's traveling. So it really helps for rotating towards your objective. Okay, spawn rate. It's fairly standard, but this is how I turn it on and off. So I make a custom float from bulk. If I add a fresh spawn rate so that I can show you what it looks like normally. Um, so a spawn rate normally is just it's just a float. So what I want to do is if I want to make a custom float from bool, what bool are we talking about? Well, we're talking about the active bool. So if it's active, how many do I want to spawn? If it's not active, how many do I want to spawn? That's all that means. So what I've got it to do is if it's active, spawn 1.5 per second, and if it's not active, don't spawn any. But you can change this so you spawn much more arrows or less arrows. But I found 1.5 just was nice to do the thing to make it look good. So we initialize the particle. Um, I've just scaled it to a uniform 0.5. It depends on what mesh you're using. You'll just have to play around with this. And then this is the smart part because we have an add velocity and we set it to linear. Now I've set it just to 1 on the x axis because that's actually the equivalent to forward. So because I'm going to attach this system to the player and just trigger it when I need to, it's already following the player's rotation. So if I always fire it out of the x-axis, it will always travel forward from the player. So no matter which way the player's facing, because I'm handling the rotation with attaching it to them. Um, there are other ways to work this out, but because we're attaching it, this is the best way to do it. And again, just you can change how much you want to how fast you want the arrows to come out of you here. What else have I got to say? Particle state, yes, we want to kill them when it's there. So scale mesh size, so I've just done a curve um, so that it's like a nice, it starts at 0 and then it scales up slightly over full size and then just curves back down to 1 and then 0. So it just gives it that little pop in effect. It's nice. And scaling the color, so this is what is changing it from green to blue. You can play with these curves, but it's basically I'm scaling the different X, Y, Z values to change the color of it, and the alpha the same, just so that it fades out as it gets older. Between 0 and 1 on Niagara systems, this is your normalized age, so it's not seconds, it's just however. So if the particle's got a 5-second lifetime, it will hit 1 at 5 seconds. Um, so it's just if you, I'm not going to explain normalized anymore. Basically, it turns you whatever lifetime you set into a range between 0 and 1. And then the clever part, the point force. So if you set the origin to this target and the amount of force, so it's a negative number because I don't want to push away from this point. I want to attract to the point. So just from trial and error, minus 400 is a nice enough pull that it pulls towards the point that we're targeting. But play around with it. Honestly, you can't hurt it. So that's how I did the arrow, and then I thought, oh, the arrow looks nice, but I think it would look nicer with the trail behind that can follow. So the trail is literally just some dots, some particles. So all this is, start of the render again, it's the default sprite material. Don't have to worry about any facing or anything on the sprites because they automatically face the camera. And then we're not using spawn rate on this because we actually want it to follow the arrow. So we're going to spawn the particles from the other emitter. And then you have to type in what the name of the other emitter is here so that it knows which one and how many you want to spawn per arrow. So at the moment I'm saying spawn 20 of them per arrow. Yeah, I think that's everything. Sample the particles from the other emitter because then it's taking its if we look here, look, so it's taking its position and applying it to the particles. It just makes them follow behind, basically. There are lots of other fun things you can do with sampling them, but I haven't touched that yet. And then it's pretty much the same as our other one. I've got a scale sprite size from 1 up to 3, just so that they like get a bit more fuzzy as it travels on. But instead of a mesh size, it's a sprite size because it's a sprite. I've copied and pasted the scale color from here to here. You can just literally copy and paste so that it keeps the same colors. And that is it, guys, for the Niagara system. So next up, what we have to do is we need to create a prefab to attach to the player so that we can always activate it from the player itself. So to do that, you would right click and entity prefab definition. But I've already made it, so I'm just going to show you what I've made. So here's the pulse. There's literally nothing in here. Look, it's just the pulse, and then I just added the component, which was the Niagara system we've just made. Make sure you untick autoplay and autoplay and editor. Well, autoplay and editor doesn't matter, but autoplay itself, because if you leave it on autoplay, I found that spawning Niagara systems into the Fortnite world, they sometimes won't ever activate again, and I think it's because they're playing the moment they get added to the sim rather than when I attach it to the player. So I would just untick that because we're going to call playing code anyway, and that is all you need to do for that prefab. Okay, and here is my verse code. Well, my Scenegraph component anyway. So I made a objective component. I've got editable set. I've got team settings and inventory device just to handle the spawn so that I can attach it to the players. And then I've got 3 triggers and 3 props, just basically so that I can demonstrate that when I trigger this trigger, it's going to this prop. Trigger this trigger, it's going to this prop, etc. In reality, I wouldn't do it like this, but it's just to demonstrate to you the different ways of doing it, and it's messy code because I've just separated them into things. Again, I wouldn't do it like this in real life, but just for a demonstration, it was the easiest way to show. So there's my editables. So what do I do at the start? So I wait for the spawned event from the team settings and inventory device, and then I call add to player. So in add to player, all I'm going to do is I'm going to find out the fork character entity. So when we subscribe to the team settings, it returns an agent, which is what I'm grabbing here, and then from the agent, I get the fork character, and then I get their entity from there. So that's the FC ent. And then the X form is just short for transform. I get their global transform. Then that's my prefab that we just made. I'm just going to add the entity to the player. And then I'm going to set the local transform of the entity we've just added, just so that it's 100 units in front of the player, because otherwise it's coming from inside the player's belly, and it looked better like this. But again, play with this yourself. You can lower it down, just change this translation here. And then the other things we do on Simulate is we listen for the triggers. So if we trigger 1, we look at prop 1, 2, prop 2, 3, prop 3. So I'll just look at one of them because they all do the same thing. So because it's a trigger, it's an optional agent because other things other than agents can trigger them. So we're going to see if the agent is a real agent, then as we did before, get the fork character entity from that. Does that fork character entity have that pulse component? If pulses, and what is the location of that prop that we want to show the pulse to? This returns a generator, find descendant components. So we then have to for loop through it, even though there's only going to be one. So we for loop through it. So then, because this is getting the actual Niagara system, this is how you set those variables that we saw in the Niagara system. So I set the target to be the props location, and then I set it active to true because you remember if that ball was false, no arrows spawned, but if it's true, then the arrows do spawn, and then we play the VFX. And that is really all you have to do to make it fire the arrows towards where you want it to go. However, we also want to turn it off if the player gets to where we want it. So I just did a little function called reach loop, and I passed in the prop location, the agent, and the pulse system. Oh, just quickly before I go on, you can see I've had to use from vector 3. That's because props use the old transform. They're not using left up forward, they're using XYZ. So from vector 3 just converts it into a left up forward. Whereas, okay, so reach loop. So I spawn reach loop, and then all this is doing is it's looping through and it's saying, is the player within 500 units of that prop that we're targeting? And if so, turn pulse off and stop the loop. And that is literally it. Now, what I'm going to try and do is I'm going to try and upload some of the assets for you so that you don't have to recreate all of this. But that's how it works. Okay, last bit of setup. I've added an entity into the world. It's just my prefab. You can literally just do add entity if you want to into the world. And then I've added the component that we just wrote in here. And then I've linked up the team settings device, all my triggers, and my props. And that's all you need to do to set the system up. Okay, and then just to show this in action. So I'll trigger this trigger, and you can see the arrows start spawning from 100 units in front of me towards the banana. I really like how this looks, but you can change it for any mesh you want. It doesn't have to be my strange looking arrows. Any colors you want. If I face this way, they start that way and then go, no, you need to go this way. So I just really like it. And then they get to the banana, and if I get to the banana, then the arrows have stopped spawning, and the particles have got a slightly longer lifetime, so they will last a bit longer. If I try the second one, It's the same Niagara system that's attached to me. I'm not attaching a fresh one every time. All I'm doing is changing that parameter. So it's telling me I need to go over here, and there's an aubergine over here I need to reach. And it stopped because I'm there. And the final one, ignore all the peelies, that was from the other video. Um, and it should be going to those grapes. It is. So you can see that they're not all traveling down the exact same path, and that is because I'm using that point force module. If I stay still, they will all travel the same path. But because I'm moving, and it generates this nice little glow, um, but because I'm moving, they don't all travel the exact same path. I like it like that, but you can make it go more direct to the thing by increasing that point force in there if you prefer. As always, just play with it and work out. I'm by no means an expert in Niagara, but I think that this looks really good. Um, and that's it, guys. I'm gonna include some links in the description, so hopefully you can download some of the assets. You might not have to remake the Niagara system if I can get that in there. Um, and yeah, enjoy. I'd like to see what you build with it.